They pushed her into the cold water, laughing like it was nothing. They thought the lake would hide their sin, that no one would ever find out. But what they didn't know was that my brother was standing on the other side, watching every second. I still remember the sound of that night, the scream that split the air like glass. It wasn't the kind of scream you forget. It was my daughter's voice, trembling between fear and disbelief. She had trusted them, her husband, his family, the same people who swore to protect her. But trust can be a dangerous thing when hearts are poisoned by pride and greed. She married into that family thinking love would heal everything. I warned her once, people who smile too much sometimes hide sharp teeth. She just laughed, said I worried too much. I wanted to believe her. I wanted her to have the happiness I never could. But happiness in their house came with conditions, obedience, silence, and a bowed head. My daughter wasn't built for that kind of cage. At first, it was small comments about her clothes, about how she spoke, how she smiled. Then it grew darker. Her mother-in-law would whisper poison into her son's ear, turning love into suspicion. Her sister-in-law would mock her at dinner, pretending it was a joke. And my daughter, she just kept smiling, thinking silence was strength. She didn't know silence only feeds cruelty. That day, she called me. Her voice was thin, almost disappearing through the line. Dad, they're planning something. I don't know what, but I'm scared. I told her to come home, but she said she couldn't. He'll get angry, she whispered. Please don't tell anyone yet. I promised her I wouldn't. I kept that promise. And I regret it every single second now. 2 nights later, it happened. The family had gone out to the lake house. They said it was for a family gathering, but it felt like a setup, something too quiet, too controlled. My brother had a bad feeling. He told me he'd follow them, just to make sure she was safe. I didn't stop him. Maybe a part of me already knew the storm was coming. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm and innocent, like it didn't know the evil standing above it. They told her to go near the edge, said they wanted to take pictures. She smiled, stepped forward, and that's when it happened. Her husband's hand touched her shoulder, not softly, not lovingly, but with the kind of push that ends everything. She fell. The water swallowed her scream. They stood there, staring. Not one of them moved. Not even to help. The laughter that followed wasn't human. It was the sound of victory, of monsters who thought they'd erased a burden. But they didn't know my brother was there. Hidden behind the trees, camera in hand, heart pounding like thunder. He saw everything. He didn't rush in, not yet. He waited. He knew my daughter could swim. He'd taught her himself as a child. She fought the waves, gasping for air, but the cold dragged her down. My brother jumped in, tore through the water, pulled her out before her heartbeat vanished completely. She coughed, shivering, whispering his name. They tried to kill me, she said, over and over, like she couldn't believe her own words. When he brought her home that night, she was trembling, her clothes torn, her soul broken. I didn't ask for proof. Her eyes were proof enough. The next morning, the son-in-law came to our house with his family, pretending to cry, pretending she ran away after a fight. But when my brother walked out holding his phone, the video of what really happened, their faces changed. Pale. Silent. The truth was heavier than any lie they could carry. Didn't call the police right away. My brother wanted to hear them speak first, to see if even one of them would admit what they did. They didn't. They played the same game, twisting the story, blaming her for everything. But when he pressed play, when the video showed their smiles as they pushed her, the room fell into ice. Her husband dropped to his knees, begging for forgiveness. His mother fainted. His father tried to destroy the phone, but my brother's grip was like iron. You tried to drown her, he said quietly. Now drown in your own guilt. But guilt is easy to fake. They begged us not to go to the police, promised money, apologies, anything to keep it quiet. My daughter just sat there, her eyes empty. She didn't want revenge, she just wanted peace. But peace doesn't come when monsters are still free. My brother made the choice for her. He handed the evidence to the police that night. He didn't care about deals or threats. They threw her to die, he told the officer. Now let the law throw them where they belong. The next few weeks were chaos as news reports, trials, whispers from neighbors who once called them respectable. I watched my daughter rebuild piece by piece, learning to breathe again. She stopped wearing bright colors, stopped trusting smiles. But she never stopped surviving. Every night, I'd see her sit near the window, staring at the stars, maybe asking why love had to hurt like that. My brother stayed close. He said nothing most of the time, but his silence carried fire. He didn't want thanks. He just wanted her safe. And maybe, he wanted them to know that karma doesn't always come slowly, sometimes it comes wearing a familiar face. But here's the truth no one tells you, revenge doesn't heal. It doesn't fill the silence left behind by betrayal. It just burns a different part of you. I saw that in my brother's eyes. I saw it in mine too. We won the fight, yes, but we lost something deeper. The innocence, the belief that family means safety. Still, every time I look at her, breathing, smiling faintly, alive, I know one thing. Evil may hide behind family names, but blood doesn't always mean loyalty. And when they pushed her into that lake, they didn't just test her strength. They awakened the one man they should have never crossed, my bra. The day after the arrest, everything changed. The house that once echoed with my daughter's laughter now felt like a silent battlefield. Every corner held memories that refused to fade. The smell of her favorite perfume still hung in the air, mixed with the scent of fear that had never left since that night. I'd sit by her door, listening to her breathing in her sleep, making sure she was still there, alive, safe, unbroken. But healing doesn't come easily to someone who's been betrayed by love. The court hearings started quietly but turned into chaos fast. The son-in-law's family hired lawyers who twisted every word, tried every trick. They said the video was fake, said it was edited to frame them. They even claimed my brother was obsessed with her and did it all to ruin their reputation. Lies piled on lies, each more disgusting than the last. But the video spoke louder than any mouth could. It didn't lie. It didn't blink. My daughter sat in that courtroom like a ghost. Her eyes didn't meet anyone's. Her hands were trembling, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was clear. I loved him, she said softly, but love shouldn't kill you. The whole room went silent. Even the judge looked shaken. I saw my brother clench his fists. He wasn't angry at them anymore, he was angry at himself for not stopping it sooner. Days turned into weeks. Reporters started showing up, standing outside our gate, flashing cameras whenever we stepped out. They called it the lake case. Some wanted interviews. Some just wanted headlines. I didn't care for fame, I only wanted justice. But my brother, he started seeing something else in all this, a chance to make sure it never happened to another girl again. He began gathering stories, reaching out to others who had faced abuse and silence. He said, if her pain can wake up one more father before it's too late, maybe it's worth it. I didn't understand then how far he'd take that promise. Because vengeance was still sleeping inside him, and when it woke, it wouldn't be quiet. One night, I woke up to a sound, the door creaking, the whisper of a motorbike starting. My brother was gone. I found a note on the table. It said only one thing, they don't deserve a courtroom. My heart froze. I called him again and again, but his phone stayed silent. For hours, I sat there, waiting for a call from the police, from anyone. But instead, the call came from the hospital. The son-in-law was in critical condition. His car had crashed into a tree on the old highway. No one knew how. The police said it looked like an accident, but I knew my brother's eyes too well. He never needed to lift a hand to deliver justice. He just knew how to move the pieces until fate played his game. When I finally saw him the next morning, he was calm. Too calm. Sitting outside, smoking, watching the sunrise like nothing had happened. "You did it, didn't you?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just said, "Sometimes God uses men like me to balance what he can't reach right away." I didn't argue. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I agreed. The son-in-law didn't die. He lived, but he'd never walk again. And that was enough. His family moved away quietly, vanishing from the city like ghosts. No apologies. No guilt. Just disappearance. My daughter didn't ask questions. She just said one thing: "I don't want to know. I just want to forget." But forgetting isn't something that happens when pain becomes part of your blood. Months passed. She started working again, teaching kids at a small school by the river. Every morning she'd walk past that same lake, the one that once tried to take her. I asked her once why she chose that place. She smiled faintly and said, "Because I don't want to fear what I survived." I think that was the first time I saw real strength in her eyes again. My brother stayed close but quieter. He'd drive her to work sometimes, wait outside until she was done. He didn't talk much anymore. His laughter, once loud and contagious, had become rare, almost foreign. But whenever I saw him watching her from a distance, I knew what he was thinking: she lived. That's enough. But fate doesn't rest when it's been disturbed. One evening, as she was leaving the school, she found an envelope taped to her car window. No name, no address, just one sentence written inside: "You think it's over?" She froze. The handwriting belonged to her ex-husband's sister, the same woman who had mocked her before pushing her closer to that lake. My brother's calm disappeared that night. He traced the letter back, tracked her movements, her calls. Within a week, he knew where she lived, who she met, even what car she drove. I told him to stop, told him revenge would only drag him deeper. He just looked at me and said, "You don't understand, brother. Some people only learn when fear knocks on their own door." I saw the change in him, the quiet rage that no longer needed words. He wasn't seeking revenge now, he was protecting what little light was left in our lives. And maybe, he was punishing himself in the process. A few days later, news broke out again. The sister-in-law's house caught fire late at night. No casualties, but everything inside was burned: phones, papers, photos, memories. The police called it an electrical fault. My brother didn't even blink when he heard. He just said, "Maybe the fire wanted to cleanse something dirty." My daughter cried when she found out. Not because she pitied them, but because she realized what my brother had become for her sake. A man who carried the weight of her pain like it was his own. "Tell him to stop," she begged me. But some storms can't be stopped once they've started. They only end when there's nothing left to destroy. That night, she went to him herself. I don't know what she said, but when she came back, her eyes were red, her lips trembling. "He's leaving," she whispered. "He said his job here is done." And just like that, he was gone. No goodbye, no destination. Only silence, the kind that feels heavier than any sound. The next morning, I found another note on the table. Same handwriting, same quiet power. It said, "Tell her the world is safer now. Tell her to live." Weeks passed after my brother left, yet the air in the house still carried his presence, the faint smell of his cologne, the echo of his boots in the hallway. My daughter tried to return to her routines, teaching at the small school, watering the plants, pretending life had become ordinary again. But every sound of a motorbike made her flinch, every shadow outside the window made her heartbeat race. You can't simply walk away from fear once it knows your name. I watched her from the porch each morning, coffee cooling in my hands, wondering if she would ever truly smile again. Sometimes she would catch me staring and force a smile, a gentle curve that never reached her eyes. "I'm fine, Dad," she'd say. But fine isn't a real word. It's a mask for people who are still bleeding inside. One afternoon, a package arrived with no return address. Inside it was a small wooden box. My daughter opened it carefully and gasped. There were 3 silver pendants, one shaped like a feather, one like a tear, and one like a flame. Underneath, a short note: "The lake sleeps. The fire rests. Live freely." No name, but we both knew whose handwriting it was. My brother hadn't vanished completely. He was still watching, protecting from the shadows. That night, she wore the feather pendant around her neck. "It means freedom," she whispered. Maybe she believed it. Maybe she wanted to. But the truth was, peace is heavier than pain, because peace demands that you stop fighting ghosts you've learned to love. I saw her struggling with that every day. A month later, she received an invitation from the education board to speak at a seminar about resilience, about surviving trauma. At first, she refused. "I don't want to be known as the girl who was pushed into a lake," she said. I told her, "Then speak as the woman who came out alive." She thought about it for days, then agreed. That single decision became the beginning of her transformation. The hall was full of teachers, parents, and students. When she walked onto that stage, her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes shone with something new, not fear, not anger, but quiet power. "Sometimes," she began, "family isn't who protects you. It's who tries to drown you, and who jumps in to save you." The audience went silent. For the first time, she told her story in public. No tears, no shame, just truth. By the time she finished, people were standing, clapping, some even crying. I felt proud in a way words can't describe. After that day, she started getting messages from others who had faced abuse, betrayal, and silence. She began helping them, guiding them to find their own strength. She was no longer just surviving, she was healing by helping. But healing always awakens something buried deep, something waiting to be faced. One evening, as she was closing her classroom, a man approached her. He looked tired, worn out, carrying guilt in his eyes. It was her ex-husband. His body was frail now. The accident had stolen his movement and most of his pride. "I needed to see you," he said softly. She froze. He wasn't supposed to know where she worked. "I'm not here to hurt you," he continued. "I just need forgiveness." She didn't answer at first. Forgiveness isn't a door you can open for the same hands that tried to close your life. He cried, not loud, not fake, but with the kind of sorrow that breaks even the strongest anger. "I don't sleep," he said. "Every night, I hear the splash, the scream, your voice. I see your brother's eyes when he pulled you out. He could have killed me that night, and maybe he should have." She looked at him quietly and finally said, "You don't need my forgiveness. You need your own." Then she walked away. That was her victory, not revenge, but release. When I told my brother about it later, through a letter, since we still hadn't seen him, he didn't reply for weeks. Then one morning a photo arrived in the mail. It was of a sunrise over a mountain, with a single line on the back: "Sometimes peace is found far from home." I realized he'd gone somewhere remote, maybe to find the silence he'd lost while fighting for us. I missed him, but I knew he deserved that calm. My daughter kept moving forward. Her story began spreading online. People called her the Lake Survivor, though she never liked that name. She preferred the one who walked away. She was invited to interviews, shows, podcasts. Every time she spoke, she ended with one sentence that became her signature: "Strength isn't born in safety, it's born when the water closes over your head, and you still choose to rise." But with fame came shadows again. Not everyone wanted her to speak. Anonymous comments flooded her inbox: "Stop lying. You ruined their lives. Your brother's a criminal." She ignored them, but I knew each message was a blade reopening old wounds. One night she broke down and said, "Will it ever end?" I told her, "Evil doesn't disappear. It just changes masks. You just have to keep your light brighter." Then one day, while she was on her way to another talk, her car was followed. She didn't notice at first. But when she parked outside the auditorium, she saw the same black sedan in the mirror. Her hands shook. She called me, voice trembling. Before I could reach her, the car door opened and a man stepped out, tall, quiet, familiar. It was my brother. He smiled softly. "You're still looking over your shoulder," he said. She ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "Where have you been?" she cried. "Keeping you safe," he replied. "But now you're stronger than anything that can chase you." It was the first time I saw both of them together since that night at the lake. It felt like the universe exhaled. He stayed for dinner that evening, quiet as ever but lighter somehow. He told us stories about the mountains, about the people he met who taught him to let go. "You don't win by burning the enemy," he said. "You win by refusing to carry their darkness." My daughter listened closely, like every word was stitching something back inside her. By the time he left again, her eyes were steady, her shoulders straight. The ghosts were still there, but they no longer owned her. After that dinner, the house felt alive again. For the first time in months, laughter touched the walls instead of echoes. My daughter seemed lighter, and my brother's eyes, though still shadowed, carried a quiet calm. But peace rarely stays for long in lives built on storms. Fate always finds a way to test what we claim we've healed. A week later, a journalist called. She wanted an exclusive piece on the lake survivor. My daughter refused at first, tired of being turned into headlines. Yet the reporter's voice trembled with honesty. "People need to hear what real courage looks like," she said. Against my warning, my daughter agreed. They met in a small cafe near the school, windows fogged by rain, cups steaming between them. What she didn't know was that a second person was filming from the corner table. The story aired 2 nights later, clean and respectful, but someone clipped one sentence out of context. If the law hadn't worked, maybe my brother would have. The internet exploded. Some praised her honesty, others called her family dangerous vigilantes. My brother watched the chaos in silence. "I told her," he murmured, "truth always cuts both ways." Still, he refused to hide again. "If they come," he said, "let them find me ready." And they did come. Anonymous messages started arriving again, pictures of the lake, the burned house, even the courtroom steps. One note simply read, "Debt never dies." My daughter tried to ignore it, but fear crept back into her nights. I would hear her pacing the hallway, whispering prayers she used to say as a child. My brother began sleeping on the couch, near the door, his old instincts awake. One evening, while locking up, he saw a shadow across the street. A man leaning against a lamppost, watching the house. When the figure noticed he'd been seen, he slipped into a car and vanished. My brother didn't tell us that night. He just started carrying the same small knife he'd once sworn never to use again. The next morning, he left early. Hours later, he called me from an unknown number. "Keep her inside today," he said. "Don't ask why." His voice was flat, controlled. I obeyed. Evening came with sirens in the distance. The news later reported a confrontation at an abandoned warehouse by the docks, a clash between 2 men, one critically injured. My brother came home past midnight, blood on his sleeve, eyes hollow. He didn't speak. He just washed his hands and sat by the window until dawn. When he finally broke the silence, his words were low. They weren't finished. The son-in-law's cousin, a few of his friends, they wanted to make us pay for the family's ruin. I wanted to ask what he'd done to stop them, but his look ended the question before it began. "No more running," he said. "It's over." I didn't know whether to believe him. Days slipped by without incident. My daughter went back to work, though her smile carried new cracks. She knew something had happened, something her uncle wouldn't say. "He's protecting me again, isn't he?" she asked. I nodded, unable to lie. She sighed. "He deserves peace, Dad." Not battles. But peace, for people like him, was always borrowed, never owned. A month later, she organized a charity event for victims of domestic violence. She wanted to turn pain into purpose. Hundreds came. Cameras flashed, children laughed, music filled the park. My brother stood at the back, unnoticed, watching her on stage as she spoke. "Survival is not the end," she said, her voice steady. "It's the beginning of something stronger than fear." The crowd applauded, but my brother's gaze was fixed on a man near the trees, the same shadow from before. He moved instantly. By the time I noticed, both were gone behind the stage. Panic surged through me. Then came the shout, a single sharp cry. Security rushed in. They found my brother holding the man down, a small pistol knocked from his hand. The police arrived within minutes. The attacker confessed he'd been hired to scare her, maybe worse. Who hired him, he wouldn't say. The incident made headlines again, but this time the narrative changed. Brother saves survivor once more. The world called him a hero, he called it exhaustion. Every time she stands up, he said quietly, someone tries to push her back down. I asked if he regretted coming home. He shook his head. No. But I'm starting to understand that maybe peace isn't a place. It's a person. She found hers. I'm still looking. After that, he decided to leave again, not out of anger, but necessity. If I stay, danger follows, he said. My daughter cried but didn't beg him to stay. She placed the flame pendant in his hand. Keep it, she whispered. It means courage. He smiled faintly. You've got enough for both of us. Then he walked into the dawn, disappearing down the same road where everything had once ended. Months rolled by. The letters kept coming, shorter, softer, filled with sketches of places he'd seen. Mountains, deserts, quiet villages. Each one carried a single line of wisdom. Water remembers who it tried to drown. Fire forgets everything it burns. Peace waits, patient, as stone. My daughter framed them along her classroom wall, calling it Uncle's Journey. Sometimes at night, she still dreams of the lake, but in those dreams, she's no longer sinking. She's standing on the shore, looking into the water, seeing not fear but reflection. And beside her, always, a distant figure watching, protecting, fading into mist. Maybe that's how love survives, not in presence, but in the shadows that never stop guarding. One evening, as rain whispered against the windows, she turned to me and said, "Do you think he'll ever come back?" I thought for a moment before answering. He never left, sweetheart. He just found another way to stay. She smiled then, a real one this time, warm and certain. The kind that said the story hadn't ended, only softened, when the night finally quieted and the stars scattered across the sky. The weight of everything that had happened hung heavy in the air. My daughter sat near the window, her eyes fixed on the faint shimmer of the lake in the distance. It was strange how something that once held so much pain could also carry the reflection of peace. She didn't speak much anymore, words had become too fragile to hold the storms she'd lived through. But I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen for months, calm. Not the empty calm of defeat, but the quiet strength of someone learning to breathe again. Her brother, who had once been all fury and fire, now stood quietly behind her. I watched the way he looked at her, protective, remorseful, proud. He had spent weeks rebuilding the pieces of our family from the ashes of what others had tried to destroy. He was the bridge between what we'd lost and what we were trying to find again. He had spoken to the authorities, shared every detail, and made sure justice came the right way this time. No revenge. No shadows. Just truth. The day the truth came out, it felt like the entire town held its breath. The people who had once smiled at our pain now whispered in disbelief. My son-in-law's family, those who had thought cruelty could go unseen, found themselves standing in the harsh light of truth. The evidence was undeniable, and the law did what it was meant to do. There were no raised voices, no threats, no hidden hands of vengeance. Just quiet justice, sealed with the weight of honesty. And for the first time, my daughter smiled without fear. I remember sitting by her bedside that evening. She reached for my hand, her grip soft but sure. "Papa," she said, "I thought the pain would never end. But maybe pain teaches us how strong we can be." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. I nodded, unable to speak. Sometimes silence is the most sacred response to courage. Her brother stood by the door, his eyes glistening. It was the first time in years I saw him truly at peace. In the weeks that followed, our house changed. The walls that once echoed with grief now carried laughter, faint and shy at first, then stronger every day. My daughter began painting again. She painted the lake, the same one that had almost taken her life, but this time she filled it with light. Gold ripples, soft skies, a horizon that promised hope. When she showed me her first finished piece, I couldn't stop staring. It wasn't just art. It was her rebirth on canvas. Her brother started helping the local youth center. He said he wanted to give other young people a way out before anger or grief consumed them. Sometimes I'd find him sitting on the porch late at night, lost in thought. When I asked what he was thinking, he'd smile faintly and say, "How lucky we are, Papa. Some people never get a second chance." Those words lingered long after the conversation ended. Months later, we went back to the lake. Not to relive the pain, but to reclaim it. The air was clear, the water still. My daughter stood by the edge, the same spot where everything had changed. She took a deep breath and whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." Then she dropped a single, white flower into the water. It floated gently, spinning slowly before disappearing into the ripples. Her brother placed a hand on her shoulder, and for a long moment, none of us spoke. The silence was full, but not heavy. I realized then that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened, it's about refusing to let it own you anymore. My daughter had learned that. My son had learned that. And maybe, in some way, so had I. That night, when we returned home, my daughter left her door slightly open for the first time in months. Light spilled from her room into the hallway, soft and golden. I stood there for a while, watching that sliver of light and thinking about how far we'd come. I thought of the pain, the fear, the anger, and how somehow, through all of it, love had found a way to survive. Days turned into weeks, and the story spread. People who once turned away now spoke of her strength. Some came to apologize for not believing, others came to learn. My daughter never showed bitterness. She said, if even one person learns to speak before they judge, then it was worth surviving. I didn't know whether to cry or smile when she said that. Maybe both. As for my brother, the one who had once burned with rage, he had become the quiet guardian of our peace. He didn't talk much about what happened anymore. Sometimes he'd drive to the lake alone, sit for a while, and come back calm. He told me one evening, "I don't go there to remember the pain, I go to thank God we came back from it." And that's when I knew our story wasn't about tragedy anymore, it was about grace. We didn't rebuild the same life we had before. We built a new one, made of forgiveness, truth, and the courage to keep going even when your heart feels like breaking. My daughter's paintings began selling, not for fame or money, but because they carried emotion people could feel. Her art told the story of pain, survival, and peace, and that became her message to the world. Some nights, when the house is quiet, I look out at the sky and whisper a small thank you, to my brother, to my daughter, to the unseen strength that carried us when everything fell apart. Because in the end, the ones who tried to destroy us only taught us how unbreakable love really is.